Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with TEDx speaker, best-selling author, and founder of Liberté Press, Teresa Rodriguez. This successful entrepreneur is the publisher, storyteller, and founder of Liberté Press, the boutique publishing house dedicated to helping women turn their stories into legacies. She empowers authors to step into their voice, claim their narrative, and transform their life experiences into books that create influence, impact, and income. Her work blends emotional truth with strategic storytelling, guiding women leaders, creatives, and changemakers to share their message with confidence and purpose. From her base in San Francisco, we get into an incredible journey. Enjoy this conversation. Well, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today.
Joe, it's my pleasure.
So before we get into your wonderful story, I want to know this. 6 years ago, this pandemic changed all of our narratives, changed the world. How did you get through the coronavirus era, and how has it changed the way that you live and work in 2026?
Great question. I was actually one of the first people in San Francisco to get COVID. I was coming home from Waikiki. I was at the Four Seasons, and it was March 13th, Friday the 13th, and I got to the airport, and we had not been shut down yet, and I didn't believe in COVID. I was one of those people like, whatever, it's just a flu. And a bunch of flights from China had landed, and I had joked to a friend saying, if there was any place that COVID existed, it just landed at Waikiki Airport. Well, San Francisco was shut down on March 14th, so I know that there was no other place that I could have picked it up. And I lost my sense of smell, and this was before we had any markers. And so I went on Facebook and I was like, hey guys, I lost my sense of smell. I grabbed an onion and I bit into this onion, and I just started to tell my story on Facebook about what was happening to me, not thinking that I actually had COVID, and finding out, probably it was like a week later, all of the symptoms started to hit me. And every day I did my best to get online to tell my story of what was happening. What was really powerful about that was I was sharing my progress and my decline at the same time, because it was still a mystery, right? We had no way to test for it. We had no vaccine. And so here I am in the front row of this virus, letting everybody on Facebook know what was happening to me. And retrospectively, so many people said, we are so grateful that you shared that information, because then when we started getting the markers, or when we actually started to believe you, because nobody believed in this thing. Yeah. And because of me sharing my story, there was a lot of people who took preventative measures, who got the vaccine, who watched me almost die. I was in bed for 17 days,
Wow.
Lost my ability to talk. I couldn't breathe. And I was raising my daughter. She was in the house with me as well. And it was through the love and support of my family and friends. They just started sending me food. And, if it wasn't for them, I don't know how I would have survived. Wow. So that being said, storytelling is a very powerful instrument. Mm-hmm. To share not only what is happening through your perspective, but connecting with other people, because they can relate to what you're going through.
Wow, what an amazing story. The weird thing about COVID was that it just hit everybody in different ways. I was talking to someone about this the other day, about this preconceived notion that it was people that were unhealthy or overweight or any of this. But it really was about the way it dealt with our biology. It's very subjective, very selective. Like, I know people that got all the booster shots, but they would still get COVID all the time,
Crazy.
And then there was some people that got long-term COVID that were in their 20s, and it's in them forever. And then we had other friends that were in the hospital, that were intubated, that were in there for months. And it's like,
it's crazy.
It was totally wild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, it affected besides my lungs, it affected my head. I've lost my memory. I couldn't smell for over a year. I'm still a little like, what? But I was that person who worked out every single day. My legs atrophied. But I survived. I lived through it. And it's crazy.
So I heard a report probably a year or two after the Chiefs won the Super Bowl in 2020, that if San Francisco would have won it and they would have had a parade, it would have been a super spreader like nothing else.
Yeah. What I am grateful for is that our city did shut down. And the reason why, Joe, is because I didn't have symptoms for 10 days.
Yeah.
But the time from that I landed back in San Francisco to that following week, I had plans with a lot of friends, and many of them were high risk. There was two elderly clients that I would visit and take to lunch. There were people in my network that their immune system is compromised, and I would have given them the virus. I know it, and I would have been responsible for their deaths.
Yeah.
And that, when you look back at that, that is a really, really horrific and scary thought.
Absolutely, it is. So let's get into your success as a writer and an entrepreneur. And to do that, I'm going to put you in front of 13-year-olds. It's career day, and you need to synthesize what you do on a daily basis to make it make sense to their brains. How do you explain your day job?
I listen to people's stories and then I rewrite them so everybody understands them and gets inspired by them.
So let's figure out how we got here. What did you want to be when you were a kid? When you were that age, what was your dream pie in the sky gig?
I'm doing it.
Okay.
I was in fifth grade and my mom had an old typewriter. And I would type out, little stories and little poems, and then I would cut them and I would staple them together. And then I would make little books as gifts for friends. And the written word, and the irony, Joe, is I'm dyslexic.
Wow. That's wild.
So for me to actually write words was really complicated. And I go back and I look at my writings when I was in fifth grade and I'm like spelling words wrong. And I draw because drawing, I can understand drawing a lot better than the actual written word. I mean, I'll have to tell you, Microsoft Word saved my life.
Sure.
Because it fixes spelling and grammatical errors, but I always wanted to be that. So I think for that 13-year-old that might have a learning disability or is a bit unsure of if their dream makes sense, a dream is a dream, and God wouldn't give us that dream if it wasn't something that we could actually accomplish.
So is text to speech kind of a godsend for the dyslexia community right now?
Yes,
Okay,
it
I would
is.
figure so, because I love
Yeah.
using that whenever I'm driving, but I would figure that would be a for sure way of kind of like Microsoft in the early days.
Yes, exactly that. And I have to say that I am a really big fan of AI. I know a lot of people are like, what? But I'm like, you know what? If you've got something stuck in your head
Uh-huh.
and you need to get it out and you need to kind of figure out what it is, AI is a really great way to get another perspective that is happening throughout the internet, right? Because what AI does is like it goes in and finds all of these things that you're talking about and then gives you, a nice synthesized version of the question that you've asked. So I think that we're living in such an incredible time in our lives where technology is starting to help augment all of these little parts of us
Totally.
that we felt were broken or that we didn't have access to.
It's interesting you use the word augment. I think about the idea of AI augmenting what we already know. It emboldens our intelligence and our purpose. I was talking to a behavioral scientist yesterday, and he had this brilliant idea, and it was like, to help augment what we know is fine, but don't allow AI to be your judgment maker.
Exactly.
That's when it
Exactly.
gets
So you have
dangerous.
to still have the sense, your intuitive sense. You still have to be present and understanding that the knowledge that AI gives you, it's not necessarily always the truth. It's not necessarily right. And that's where you have to use your own sense of self to research the research, right?
Yeah. Who were writers? Who were authors, literary minds growing up that really inspired you and made you feel more and more like this was your purpose in life?
The Bronte sisters, I mean, my God, talk about women that just were pushing the envelope in the Gilded Era where women were supposed to stay home and be quiet. And Dickinson, where she really suffered from a lot of mental illness. And I do believe that writers, Ernest Hemingway and Steinbeck, there is something in writers' brains that we try to figure things out. life doesn't always make sense to us. So one of the best ways for us to figure it out is to write it down.
Yeah.
And, I think Charles Dickens was so smart in his way of taking stories that we all live through, these ordinary tales, and wrapping these incredible odysseys around them.
Yeah.
So I'm really inspired by so many different writers, depending on what I want to read that day. Is it something that I want to do nonfiction, or do I want to do fiction, right? So then your nonfiction, you've just got so many people out there that are giving information to us that they've learned throughout the years. And I'm telling you right now, Napoleon Hill, there are some Neville Goddard, like there are solid performers that I keep going back to time and time again. Man's Search for Meaning, that is the book, the cornerstone of everything that I believe. Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah. So what was the first piece that you wrote and you got a really good visceral reaction from that maybe solidified what you were doing, made it make sense? Because it's that whole like you do it because it feeds your ego, super ego, your id,
Yeah.
but you also want a reaction. You want an effect. Do you remember that moment that someone reacted to your writing?
Yeah, I do. I was in college. It was just community college, and my sister was born normal, but then she caught a virus on her eyelid that traveled to her brain and covered her brain in cold sores. And it was encephalitis. She ended up spending the rest of her, short 10 years of life with severe disabilities. She was nonverbal, seizures. She lived in a wheelchair. And I grew up with this child. She was 8 years younger than me. So I raised her. And there was a lot of tension in my brain as a child. There was a lot of resentment because I couldn't go to football games and hang out like other kids because I had to come home and be a caretaker for my sister. And there was also a lot of shame wrapped around it because at this, in the 80s, we didn't talk about handicapped children. And there was some really mean words that were being used
Hmm.
in our vernacular at the time that we would call people when we thought that they were, disabled. So that being said, there was a lot of shame wrapped around it. And the first time I wrote something was in fifth grade about my sister, and I didn't do anything with that. But then I was in community college and I wrote a piece about what it was like to live this life with this child you knew was going to die, but at the time was living and was suffering from all of these ailments. And how do you wrap your brain around that? And I remember my professor saying, this is extraordinary. You are an incredible writer, and this is something that you should really examine and explore as something to do as a career.
So where were you born and raised?
I was born in the Bay Area. I was born
Okay.
in Sacramento and then raised in a little town called Benicia, which is up the bay. So yeah.
My son's on the spectrum and he's 21, and I understand, what you're talking about to a certain degree. When you're around another human being that needs your help, that needs assistance, but has their own special set of gifts, and they transform the way that we see this reality. So
Completely.
along with your sibling, what was it about your friends and your parents and your family and those around you that allowed you to become a successful entrepreneur, that allowed you to pursue writing and taking in people's stories and transmuting those into something that will make their lives better?
So my sister died. I turned 18. I moved out of the house. And 2 days later, she died. So you talk about like this heavy grief that you're like, how do you wrap your head around that, right? And so I I was working for Richard Simmons, who I absolutely love, adore. He really set the stage with respects to being positive and outgoing and friendly and making the most of every single day. And I was going to stay in that world, and I was hit by a car, and I lost one of my discs between L4 and 5. So my career as an aerobic instructor, as somebody who understands kinesiology, was destroyed. And I had to reinvent myself. And I think that that art of pivot is a very powerful thing. And I think that when we start to learn, and I think a lot of us started to do that in COVID, we're like, oh crap, I can't do that. I got to do something else. So I pivoted. And what I did was I ended up moving to Australia and going to school there. And I became a model, and I worked on a game show. And I was able to travel throughout Australia for this game show. And that really, I fell in love with travel. And I knew that I wanted to do something in that space. And in that game show, it was storytelling. It was about, blind dates. It was three contestants and, one, and they pick, and then they go on this trip. And I have to write everything that they're doing and all the little secret things that happen. And then they come back and it gets filmed as the recap segment for the show. And I moved back to the United States and was working in advertising. And I still love this thing about travel. And I would go on these trips by myself all the time. And my friends are like, how do you do it? How do you do it? I'm like, you just do it. And I started to put a plan together. And my friends are like, you should write about it. You should write a book about it. And I was in Peru on a plane coming back from visiting Machu Picchu. And we left Lima and we lost an engine over the Andes, and the whole cabin filled with smoke. So instead of oxygen coming or air coming through the vents, it was smoke. The whole plane filled with smoke. The smoke alarms are going off. And I'm like, well, here we go. I didn't do all the things that I wanted to do. And at that moment, I made a deal with the universe that if I land on terra firma, that I will start a website for solo women travelers. I will empower solo women travelers. This is what I will do. So we landed clearly. It was an emergency landing with ambulance. I had fire trucks, ambulance fire trucks, foam on the runway. And I went back to school to Stanford, and one of my professors I told him I want to write this book about traveling solo. And he said, the only way to do that is to start a website. This is in like early 2000s where there was no Google or Facebook or LinkedIn I'm like, okay. So I learned how to write code, and I learned how to fly planes. And when I would go out to the tarmac to get in the plane, they would call me Tango for T, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Echo, Tango. Yeah. And they called me a diva because I'm a bit of a diva. So they're like, hey, Tango Diva. And so I started a website for solo women travelers called Tango Diva. And that grew, and I got my first book deal with Penguin. So I think that the message with everything that I've done, I've always kept my passion and my love as a North Star. Now I'm going to remind everybody that I had to work my tail off in every one of these pivots. I had to learn Excel. I had to learn code. I had to learn, all of these different skills. I didn't just wake up one morning and say, oh, I'm going to write a book. It was a process. And with writing, every step is a process. With getting published, every step is a process. And I think so many people think, oh, well, I got this book in me, I'm just going to write. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. So you've had, just in this brief span of talking, you've had enough that would probably fill several, if not more, lifetimes for most of us.
Yes.
The levels of grief and overcoming and evolution. Who's been that North Star, that hero for you that's allowed you to stand tall right now and to be who you are?
So this is a really great question. And the reason why is I think that heroes change. The hero that I had in 5th grade is not the same hero that I had in high school. My heroes in high school were Mr. Riley, my English teacher, who really believed in my skills. Mrs. English, who was another English teacher who believed, which I thought it was great that her last name was Mrs. English. Marge Pearson, who was my mom when I needed a mom and is still a bright light in my life. And I think that what is really important for each of us is to take the time to find what part of us needs something and what that need is, and then reach out to people who can help with that need. So in my career, I've had Lois Learman, who was the publisher of Nob Hill Gazette, which was my first true magazine job, where I was the travel editor for 9 years, who taught me the magazine world, how the magazine industry worked. And right now in my life, my mom is actively dying. She's got stage 4 cancer. And my aunts have been a really strong support system. And I've got nine of the nine aunts, eight are still alive, and each of them are like, a spoke on a tire that help balance the craziness that is happening in my life right now. So I think heroes can be anybody or anything living or dead. Maya Angelou, I would pray to Maya, there's a great line that she talks about in one of her speeches, is that when she steps up to the stage, she asks her ancestors to show up with her.
Hmm.
And I do that too. I mean, I woke up this morning and I was like, ancestors, give me strength to be with my mother at this time. She's chosen a, an assisted departure. And that's really hard to wrap my head around. So I'm like, ancestors, be with me during this time and greet my mother as she crosses that bridge.
Absolutely. You know, you're giving a lot of women and their stories an incredible gift of having the world hear it. But in that process, you get to fill your cup up with all of these wonderful stories of humanity. And I know that from what I'm doing. How good does that make your soul feel? Like, how much does that fill you up as a human and make you feel like your purpose, you found it?
Oh my gosh. I have some incredible authors. I think you interviewed one of them, Shannon Michelle,
Yeah.
who ended up, living this huge big life, hit by a motor, she's on her motorcycle, gets hit by a car, has a near death experience, ends up losing her memory in a coma for months. She comes out of this and doesn't know who she is. And that I had the ability, that my business had the ability to translate her chaos
Yeah.
into a book and then create all of these processes that could get her from just an idea in her head to the written word to
Yeah.
now being on stages across the country sharing her story. It is profoundly rewarding.
She's incredible. I remember her so well. Like, I just couldn't believe what I was listening to and the way that she was living her life and how positive she was, because things like that could break a lot of people. But not only did it not, she's just absolutely inspiring so many other people, and to be a catalyst to that's huge. Um,
Yeah, so the fact that I can take somebody like her
oh yeah.
and then give her these roots and wings, it
Oh,
is so fantastic. And I started with Tango Diva, my business. I ended up selling it because I got pregnant, and at 42 I became a single mom. And I'm like, I got to raise this kid on my own, which I did. She's 14 now and thriving. And I learned that we all need support, and that if I can give people like Shannon wings and a venue to share. So with what I learned with Tango Diva, I took and have now put into with Liberté, and we've started this incredible thing online called Liberté Ladies, where we meet online anywhere in the world. And we have one with Shannon next week where she gives intuitive readings for people for free. Yeah.
it's wonderful. So I'm curious, if you had a dream tonight, you ran into that 18-year-old version of you that left home, ready to go out into the world, and you ran into her at your age now, and there was a film projector next to her, and you hit play, and it was a 60-second highlight reel of the life you've lived, what you've overcome, what you've succeeded at. Would that young version of you believe that your life turned out this way?
No, not at all. That young version of me didn't think that I was going to live past 30. I really didn't. And because of that, I made some really crazy decisions and a lot of stupid decisions. And I would, if I could talk to that 18-year-old, I would tell her that she's going to live a long, long, magnificent life and to make decisions based on longevity and not just emotional, irrational, like, let's go do this because I'm not going to be alive. Yeah.
So, of everything that you've done and overcome and evolved to, what are you the proudest of? Other than your daughter, maybe professionally or otherwise, what are you the proudest of?
Well, I am the proudest of writing a science fiction series that's about to come out in June called Clothos. I went through severe postpartum depression and I was really debating. I've had suicide ideations for, not anymore. So I'm just going to say that now because I've done a lot of work. But that was one of the reasons why I was like, I'm just going to leave. But I had her and had severe postpartum depression, and her bio dad was a cruel person, and you're a horrible mom, and you're da 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 da. And I internalized all of that. I was like, I don't want to be here anymore. And that started me thinking, what would I be worth if I was not here?
Yeah.
And I was thinking of, well, somebody could have my heart, somebody could have my eyes, somebody could have all these different parts of me. And in that, the question arose, how much is my soul worth? How much is my life worth? If I could sell parts of years of my life, what would they be worth? And then I expanded that into, what if we could actually find it and where would it be? And I said, okay, it would be in the pineal gland. It would be in this sacred part of the cave of Brahma, where our third eye is. And it would be these little threads, like telomeres. And what if we could remove them from one person through a virus and then inject them into another person, shortening the life of the person that they were taken from and increasing the life of the person they were injected into?
Yeah.
And so I wrote a whole book. It's called Clothos. Clotho is one of the three fates, the Greek fate. Oh, I can show it to you because I just got the book.
Wow.
But look at that cover. It was
That's
done
amazing.
by Daniel
Yeah.
Martin Diaz, who's just this incredible art illustrator. Daniel Martin Diaz, who's done incredible work. So you could see the three the strings, the eye, and the pair of scissors. So what the three fates do is, the first one, Clotho, spins your thread of life. Lachesis measures it to see how much life you're going to have, and then Aptros cuts it. Wow. So this is a science fiction story that takes place at the particle accelerator here at Berkeley.
So let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that you work with, everyone that knows you, all of your fans, your readers, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think that I am a soul, an eternal, everlasting soul that has chosen to go on this journey called Teresa Rodriguez. And I'm going to ride this ride as long as grace will allow me. And in the process, live a purposeful life and give as much as I can back to this experience I'm living.
I love it. So if anybody wants to visit Liberté, they want to get your new series, your books, all the wonderful work you're doing, where do they go?
LibertéPress.com.
Okay, perfect. What a joy, Teresa. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your energy. I love it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. Our esteemed theme music was composed and produced by the great E.E. Pointer of Kansas City's River Cow Orchestra. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.